Chapter 1, Jemhu. When Lily stepped into Yunkai's house, she immediately spotted Ran pulling 2 yellow glass ampoules from her coat pocket. Lily's sharp eyes quickly caught the label, morphine. Then her gaze shifted to Yunkai, standing with his back turned, completely unaware. Alarm bells rang in her mind. Without a second thought, she reached into her jacket and pulled out a miniature tranquilizer gun, firing it straight at Ran. Though Ran's reflexes were fast, she wasn't fast enough. The dart, which should have hit the back of her neck, struck her in the shoulder as she turned around. A flicker of confusion flashed through Ran's eyes before her body slackened, collapsing into unconsciousness. Yunkai, startled by the noise, spun around and caught her just in time. Pian, what's wrong? He asked in alarm. But Ran, eyes closed, didn't respond. Relax. She's only been tranquilized. She's not going to die, Lily said sharply. Her tone was far from gentle. Walking into a scene like this left her with little patience. Lily, what do you think you're doing? Yunkai cradled Ran in his arms, throwing a disapproving look at his college classmate. You're worried about her? You should be more concerned about yourself. Lily stepped forward, frowning. She pulled the dart from Ran's neck, then took the 2 morphine syringes from her hand and held them up. Take a look. What do you see? Yunkai's eyes followed hers and fell on the syringes. He said nothing. This is the woman you chose? Addicted to drugs? Her mind clearly isn't sound. Lily shot a cold glance at the unconscious figure in his arms. Don't speak about her like that, Yunkai sighed. Come in, I was hoping to talk to you. After settling Ran in the bedroom, he led Lily to the living room and motioned for her to sit. I honestly don't know what to do with her, he said, face heavy with worry. Lily, you've been working in genetic neuroscience. Is there any way you can help? I just want to open up her social cognition, help her break out of her mental bubble. If this goes on, I'm afraid I'll lose her completely. Why not just let her go? Lily said bluntly. Some people, they're simply beyond saving. You know I can't. Yunkai smiled bitterly. I heard about your research, Realm01 dream, right? Didn't you say it had successful cases? You're referring to the VR cognition experiment? Lily raised an eyebrow. Yes, in theory, it can reshape behavioral perception. But personality rooted in pathological genetics, like hers, is incredibly difficult to shift. I'm not unwilling to try. I'm just warning you, it may not work. Even a sliver of hope is better than none. Please. I'm out of options, Yunkai said, running a hand through his hair. The calm, composed man looked deeply defeated. Do you trust me? Lily asked, her gaze narrowing. If you do, then let me take care of her. Yunkai paused. He did trust her, but letting Ran out of his sight, even for a moment, felt unbearable. And yet, their situation had reached a breaking point. If he couldn't let go, there would be no way forward. All right, he finally said. Lily let out a breath. Don't worry. I'll make sure she's properly cared for. She took Ran away that very day. For 3 days, Yunkai didn't call. He didn't know what he feared more, what might have happened, or whether the experiment would fail. On the 4th day, he gave in. He drove to Lily's downtown apartment and walked into her lab, only to be stunned by what he learned. You what? You sent her into a virtual world? He asked, voice sharp with disbelief. Lily, are you serious? Do I look like I have time to joke? Lily replied. You asked me to help her. The standard version of Realm01 dream wasn't enough, so I let her enter physically. In a hyper-realistic world, she'd believe it was all real. Only then could the experience actually change her. Yunkai sucked in a breath. Was Lily insane? What if something went wrong? How had she even managed to send someone in with a real body? Don't give me that look, Lily said coolly. There are things I can't explain. You know that. What kind of world did you send her into? Yunkai asked. I want to see her. Come here. I have her entire log on file. Lily rotated her chair and faced the screen. Yunkai leaned in as she typed a long series of complex passwords. The screen blurred, then sharpened into a 3D virtual map. This world is called Jianghu. It's modeled after traditional Chinese society, similar to ancient times, but without emperors or strict class divides. The people have their own rules. Even I, the creator, can't interfere with their history. That's incredible, Yunkai murmured, scanning the scrolling data. It's not just incredible, it's revolutionary. The simulation is so immersive that everything the participant does is archived automatically, Lily explained while switching screens. And Ran? He asked. Lily pulled up her file. Ran, female, 26. Origin, unknown. Unknown? Why? Yunkai frowned. Because there's no such thing as V-City in that world. It doesn't exist in their context, so the system defaults it as unknown. I see, he murmured, though something felt off. Still, he kept reading. Path, Sea of Flowers, Chinma City, Lu Residence, Qingshui Wharf. He watched the recordings as if viewing a movie of her new life. The more he saw, the deeper his frown became. By the time he finished, his expression had darkened completely. The time here doesn't match reality, he finally noted. Of course not. That world has its own temporal framework, Lily replied. I guess I'm just used to synchronized systems. Most games mirror real-world time. This isn't a game, she said flatly, her voice tinged with annoyance. Do you think people like me work at the same level as game designers? Sorry, that came out wrong. He smiled apologetically. Lily was young, but a genius in both biology and physics. She hated being underestimated. I know this all sounds surreal, but believe me, you're lucky I'm even showing you this. Most people would never be allowed access. Yunkai smiled faintly and turned back to the screen. A slideshow of character portraits was playing. He narrowed his eyes. Lily, why do these characters look familiar? She faltered, then said, well, because their personality blueprints were based on you. What? More precisely, the you from before. You had multiple personality traits, remember? I used your genetic samples and created 8 key figures in the virtual world from that. You're playing God now? He asked half-jokingly. Then you're their ancestor, she answered smoothly. Yi Yunkai shook his head with a laugh. Lily truly did think differently. People said geniuses were half mad. Today, he had no doubt. He suddenly turned serious. Lily, I want to go in. Her smile vanished. What did you say? Chapter 2, No Love Without Madness. I want to go in. In a 3-story apartment on the outskirts of V-City, a short-haired woman in a blue tracksuit stared in disbelief at the tall man before her. His face was strikingly handsome, and his gaze carried a restrained depth. Are you kidding me? You're perfectly fine. Why would you even want to go in? Lily glared at Yi Yunkai in shock. I'm going in to protect her. Let me spell this out for you. Inside that world, you're just an ordinary man. You can't even guarantee your own safety, so how are you supposed to protect her? Even if I can't protect her, just watching her from within would be enough. At least then, we'd exist in the same world. Watching her from behind a screen like this, it feels like I've already lost her. The fear was spreading inside him, threatening to consume him whole. Are you crazy? She snapped. You think you can just enter that place on a whim? I just can't stop worrying about her. Yi Yunkai let out a long sigh. In such a short time, she'd already offended so many people. What he saw on the screen was deeply disturbing. Lily rolled her eyes with dramatic flair. Seriously, what's the point of risking your life to protect her if she doesn't even realize it? He remained silent. After a long moment, he spoke again. Let me go in. Suppressing her frustration, Lily finally sighed in defeat. So, no matter if she knows or understands, you're going to do this anyway? I can't let her go. Yi Yunkai sighed once more, the bitterness in his expression tugging at the heart. Yi Yunkai, can't you be rational for once? Logical? You have an IQ of 200, yet when it comes to her, you completely lose your mind. I've been rational for 13 years, he said, sinking into the sofa with a touch of weariness. But not a day has passed where I didn't think of her. If I'd known that leaving her would be this painful, I'd rather never have recovered. So you'd rather go back to being that schizophrenic, obsessive wreck than continue this distant relationship? She asked sharply. But have you thought that if you hadn't left back then, she might never have grown into who she is now? People only grow when they have something to strive for. If you hadn't been adopted and separated, you both might have remained a madman and a fool. Lily was always blunt with her words. But Yi Yunkai knew she didn't mean to offend. They simply lived in a world where facts were laid bare. Perhaps because they once belonged to the abnormal spectrum, her way of thinking had always been a little different. People said they were not normal, and perhaps they were right. Autistic minds might develop unevenly, but their patience and persistence often surpassed those of so-called normal people. It was that unwavering focus, devotion, loyalty, and emotional intensity that made them incapable of betrayal. Once they loved, it was for life, to death, and beyond. That was why no one understood why a man of such promise would so stubbornly pursue a girl with autism. He clearly had better choices, yet he never looked at anyone else. In their world, love was binary. You either loved or didn't. No gray areas. No giving up. That kind of devotion was rare, and even though he had left that world, he never abandoned his loyalty. What others thought didn't matter. He only cared that the one person who mattered was safe. As for the rest, he had a lifetime to let it fade. Mad or foolish, neither of us ever minded, he murmured. Just like when they were kids, his temper was unpredictable, scaring off all the other children. But his little Pian had always sat quietly beside him. That kind of unwavering loyalty was beyond most people's understanding. But for her, it came naturally. From that moment, he had silently vowed, no matter what the future held, he would never leave her side. But you're healthy now. Do you really want to go back to the way things were? Of course not. For once, a soft smile lit his face. I want to bring her back, to live a normal life with me. Is that so? Lily scoffed. I must be terribly naïve then. Is poisoning someone now your idea of a normal life? Don't forget, if I hadn't happened to pass by your apartment 3 days ago, you wouldn't even be standing here. Those morphine syringes, along with the extras they later found hidden on Ran, were enough to kill someone. And what had Yi Yunkai done to deserve that? Just exchanged a few words and held hands with an old classmate. What kind of twisted mind considered that grounds for murder? And he still believed he could bring her back? Was he delusional? Lily, it's not what you think. Yi Yunkai rubbed his temples, frustrated. Perhaps it was her scientist mindset, relying on data and evidence, but her prejudice against Ran had long taken root. She didn't mean to kill me. And even if she did, she would have asked for my permission first. Lily snorted. And who asks their victim before killing them? Yi Yunkai, do you hear yourself right now? That's just how her mind works. You might not get it, but I do. All she wanted was to close the distance between us. Most couples might fight, but the girl might pout or complain. Ran didn't. She didn't know how. She was brilliant in many ways, but when it came to human connection, she hadn't changed in 13 years. That meant only one thing. For all that time, her world had revolved around one person, him. Even after he left, she kept him in her heart, untouched and irreplaceable. No one else existed. No one could ever replace him. Others might not see that, but he knew. I'm sorry, but I truly don't understand, Lily muttered. Poisoning someone over a misunderstanding? Could such a warped form of love really last a lifetime? She had her doubts. Did Yi Yunkai truly love someone like Ran? Or was he simply using this madness as a shield from every woman who came after him? Lily, I know you mean well, but I've already made up my mind. Fine. I know there's no stopping you. After a long silence, Lily finally sighed. But that place, it's not easy to enter. And it's not absolutely safe. I'm not afraid. That was exactly why he had to go, because Ran was in there. How could he just sit back and let her face danger alone? You're not afraid, but I am. Lily suddenly shot to her feet, her voice rising with uncharacteristic emotion. Yi Yunkai stared at her, momentarily stunned. What was going on with her? Chapter 3, Entering. You're not afraid? Well, I am. Lily took a moment to compose herself before slowly sitting back down in her chair. Do you even realize who you are? You're the son of Yi Haolong, the wealthiest man in V City, the young master of the Yi family. If something happens to you, your adoptive parents would come after me like madmen. They won't, Yi Yunkai replied, shaking his head with a restrained smile. Oh, they won't? You sure about that? These are the same people who once threw a slipper at a prosecutor in court. You really think they wouldn't bury my entire lab under a mountain of flip-flops if anything happened to you? Lily scoffed. His eccentric adoptive parents were notorious in their circles, their outrageous antics, their disregard for convention, their complete unpredictability. It was enough to give anyone a headache. Well, they just get a little impulsive sometimes, Yi Yunkai admitted, wiping a bead of sweat from his brow. And they usually have their reasons. Is that so? Lily gave him a look that screamed, please, spare me the nonsense. From what she knew, these mishaps were practically daily occurrences. It seemed every other newspaper featured the name Yi Haolong, inevitably followed by some prominent victim, a politician who got punched, a celebrity who got cursed at, or a tycoon who fell victim to some prank. And yet somehow, these incidents always fizzled out into nothing, wrapped in a haze of mystery. Only now did she realize, this man before her had been cleaning up the messes behind the scenes all along. Without him, chaos would have long erupted. Honestly, who knew what kind of karmic merit had blessed that wild couple with such a son? They're not unreasonable people, Yi Yunkai said earnestly. I think you're the only person on earth who would say that. Lily rolled her eyes. From her perspective, the words logic and reason simply didn't exist in the Yi household. Do you want me to sign a waiver? Yi Yunkai sighed. A waiver? Lily snorted. Your parents have zero regard for the law. That paper won't hold them back. If they don't use it as a tissue, I'd already consider myself lucky. Then what do I need to do for you to agree? I'll help you, she said, but only if you promise to follow my instructions at all critical moments. All right, I promise. He didn't hesitate. Don't agree so quickly. I'm not convinced you'll actually follow through, she said, eyeing him with suspicion. Go ahead, he replied after a 3-second pause. Lily turned back to the screen, freezing the image of several characters. Since these people are modeled after you, there might be some unique interactions. Once you're inside, I advise you not to wander aimlessly. I'll define a safe zone for you. She pointed to a city surrounded by dense jungle. These 8 characters are deeply connected to you. I don't know what might happen if you get too close to them. I'll really be going into that world? Yi Yunkai tapped his finger on the screen. If it helps, think of it like time travel, Lily replied dryly. She'd already seen his skepticism coming. Swallowing his astonishment, Yi Yunkai asked, just now, what exactly was it that you wanted me to agree to? Lily's expression grew heavy. In a softer tone, she explained, because this virtual space is so realistic. There's a high possibility your little girlfriend might start confusing it with the real world. Worse, she might fall for a virtual character, fall in love with that world, and never come back. The air seemed to freeze. After a long silence, like someone had lifted a spell, a faint smile appeared on Yi Yunkai's otherwise emotionless face. She won't. Lily didn't try to comfort him. She simply brought up a series of statistics. Globally, individuals with autism make up about 0.1% of the population. Of them, about 50 are considered idiot savants. Heroine falls into a unique category. She has extreme difficulty with interpersonal skills, her social IQ is about 85, and her emotional intelligence is that of a 10-year-old. But her intellectual gifts in other areas double that of an average person. She's unlike other autistic scholars, she can live independently, functions much like a regular person, but her behaviors and thinking remain far from normal. Genetically speaking, she's an anomaly, a 1 in a billion case. In short, there is no one else like her on this planet. Lily, are you trying to tell me that Pianran might be an alien? Or a robot? Yi Yunkai still smiled, emotion unreadable. I've run tests. Her cellular structure is completely human, she's not a robot. No alien markers either. She noticed his amused smirk and realized he was probably laughing at the fact that she had actually tested that. A perfectly healthy human standing in front of her, and she still trusted her machines more than her eyes. But honestly, it wasn't her fault. Pianran was just that abnormal. Technology was her only way of being sure. Lily, you didn't need to go that far. Yi Yunkai's smile faded, his expression turning solemn. None of that matters to me. Because even if she were a robot, I'd still love her with everything I have. That's exactly what I was afraid of. Lily's anger finally erupted. Which is why, if that situation occurs, you must immediately exit the virtual world. That's the condition I want you to agree to. And leave her behind? Let her fend for herself? Yi Yunkai's lips tightened. That was no different from abandoning her. If that happens, then it's her choice. Lily's voice was harsh, even cruel, but when you thought about it, what other choice did she have? She couldn't interfere with what happened inside that world. She had no authority to force anyone out once they entered. Sorry, I can't do that. Leave her behind? Impossible. Just as she expected. Well, then I'm sorry too. Negotiations are over. Deal's off. If you think you're so capable, go in on your own. Lily turned her head away, crossing her arms. She refused to look at him. A long, awkward silence followed. There's no compromise? He finally asked, relenting. Without access, there was nothing he could do. Anything else is negotiable, but not this, Lily said firmly. Fine. I agree. It took everything in him to say it, but Yi Yunkai finally relented. Seeing him yield, Lily finally exhaled in relief. Don't blame me. I don't have a choice either. Sacrificing one person was better than everyone dying. Besides, she didn't even want to imagine how his parents would react if they found out she made their precious son disappear. How could I blame you? Without you, I wouldn't even have the chance to try. Yi Yunkai smiled gently. Thank you, Lily. No matter what happens, you'll always be my most important friend. Friend? A friend who never stops causing her trouble. How precious. For safety reasons, I'll be monitoring your movements the entire time. She shot him a glance that clearly said, don't even think about pulling anything. I'll be watching. Full surveillance? Yi Yunkai asked, a little awkwardly. What? Worried I'll peek at something private? Cough. He gave a few dry coughs, flustered. No, I just mean, if you're keeping an eye on Pianran too, that'll help ease my mind. I'll be monitoring, not intervening. If she gets into trouble, don't expect to play hero. This isn't a game. There are no respawns. One life, no do-overs. If you die in there, that's it. I can't send you back. I understand. I'll be careful. Yi Yunkai nodded. When do we start? Tomorrow. I need to make preparations, she said. All right. I'll come back tomorrow. As he turned to leave, Lily watched his retreating figure, and her expression slowly darkened. 3 days ago, if she'd just moved a little faster, maybe that woman would have disappeared from the world. Curling up in her chair, she pulled her legs close and buried her face in her arms. Anxiety and unease twisted deep inside her. Don't blame me, Yi Pianran. Your existence is a threat to Yi Yunkai. What I'm doing is for everyone's good. Yes, I'm not wrong. I'm just removing a threat for an old friend. It's not wrong. Not at all. Chapter 4, Awakening. It felt like a dream. When her consciousness slowly returned, she didn't know where she was. Through the haze, she saw a woman in a white dress, telling her she could be reborn. Reborn? So, she had already died? Strangely, she felt a sense of relief. But rebirth? Maybe not. Perhaps she was never meant to exist in this world. She had always been out of place, stumbling forward even when someone lit the way for her. She didn't want a second chance. Without Yi Yunkai, her world was already steeped in gray. She knew she couldn't change her nature. No matter how many lives she lived, she would likely still face abandonment in the end. Do you want to change your fate? The woman in white asked, her eyes calm. Go to another world. A world where no one knows you. Become someone else. Start over. You can change your name, your appearance, even your personality. Everything can be changed. Everything? She murmured. The only thing she truly wished to change was the ending. Yes, if you desire it. She hesitated, thoughts spinning. Doubt lingered in her eyes. Do you know? The woman said impatiently. Hesitation often makes opportunity slip away. You have 3 seconds to decide. I'll go. She answered at the second. But, who are you? Me? The woman let out a self-mocking laugh. I'm just a fool. She stared at her, trying to search for a trace of recognition. Nothing. She was certain she didn't know this woman. But then, why help her? Why are you helping me? Even in this foggy state, her mind wasn't idle. Why? The woman scoffed, as if the question itself were laughable. She crossed her arms over her chest, gazing at her with a composed, even mocking look. Answer me something first. Go ahead. That posture, so familiar, so calm, so indifferent, as if nothing in the world could shake her. The woman in white furrowed her brow, unsettled. Is this the female version of Yi Yunkai? Suppressing her discomfort, she waved her hand. In the sky, a massive mirror materialized, clearly reflecting the image of the 2 women. Who do you think is more beautiful, me or you? You. She answered instantly, without the slightest hesitation. The woman stared at her, as if she were some kind of strange creature. If that's true, then why would a man choose you over me? Because the man's blind. Another quick, calm reply. You're the blind one, the woman snapped, unable to hold back. That question, you should ask the man. Her voice was even, her face free of irritation or emotion. Affection is subjective, yet it exists objectively. It's not something that can be easily explained away. The woman in white suddenly composed herself. What am I doing? Why am I acting so childish? So petty? She thought she had let go. But the moment she looked at this girl, she couldn't help but compare herself again. That's enough questions, she said at last. Now, confirm your choice. Do you want to start over? A second chance at life, she whispered to herself. All right, I'll live again. It was as if she had forgotten the woman's presence entirely. The woman in white looked at her one last time, then lifted her hand. Thick mist rose and enveloped them. Go, Yi Pianran. Whether this is a blessing or a curse, is entirely up to you. Her fading voice floated through the fog, then vanished. Yi Pianran was awakened by an overwhelming scent of flowers. When she opened her eyes, the first thing she saw was the endless, pure blue of the sky. She blinked, dazed, not knowing where she was. Slowly, she sat up and found herself surrounded by a sea of flowers. Blossoms in clusters and crowds stretched across the land, vibrant and endless, until the colors blurred into the horizon. What's going on? Why am I here? Where is this place? She raised her hand to her forehead, the wide sleeve sliding down to reveal her pale wrist. She froze, then stood up and took a closer look at what she was wearing. Flowing sleeves, a cinched waist, a long skirt. It all felt strange, though she couldn't pinpoint exactly why. Her mind was blank. Her memories were gone. Closing her eyes, she drew in a deep breath. The air was tinged with damp earth. She paused for a moment, then lifted her foot to take a step, only to stumble on her own hem. Ah, she cried out as she tumbled into the flowers, startling a flurry of butterflies into the air. Frowning, she pushed herself up and was about to brush the dirt from her clothes when she suddenly sensed something, a subtle presence. She turned quickly, eyes sharp. Not surprisingly, she saw him, a man in black. He had long hair tied back, but Pianran didn't find that odd. His features were refined, a gentle smile on his lips. Dressed in a dark robe embroidered with golden cloud patterns along the collar and sleeves, and a matching belt, he stood tall and elegant. Zhuangzi dreamed he was a butterfly, the man said with a smile. Who would have thought I'd meet a butterfly fairy in broad daylight? His voice was clear and warm, like his demeanor. Pianran glanced at him but said nothing. Instead, she turned and began walking in the opposite direction, this time carefully lifting her skirt to avoid another fall. The man looked momentarily stunned. Then, recovering, he called out, "Miss, wait." She stopped, turned, and asked, "Yes?" The man gave an awkward smile. "Where are you from? Why are you here alone?" "I don't know," she answered, frowning. Her memory was still missing. "You don't know?" He blinked, baffled. "You don't need to be afraid. I'm not a bad person." "Not a bad person?" person? What, do bad guys go around advertising it? Pianran gave an almost imperceptible twitch at the corner of her mouth. What does it matter to me whether you're a good person or not? I'm leaving. He was stunned again. As she turned to leave, he called after her once more, wait, what is it now? Pianran stopped again, annoyance flickering in her voice. They didn't even know each other. Why did he keep calling her back? The man looked at her, silent this time. Then he slowly stepped closer until he stood directly in front of her. With a bright smile, he said, nothing important. I just wanted to tell you, your face is dirty. He raised his hand and gently wiped away a smudge of dirt from her cheek with the pad of his thumb. Boom. Pianran's mind exploded. An overwhelming stream of information surged into her brain without warning. Fragmented memories, image after image, flashed before her eyes like a spinning reel. They spun faster and faster until they formed a complete picture, lodging themselves deep into her consciousness. Her face turned deathly pale. What's wrong? The man asked, surprised by the sudden change in her expression. He forgot to even lower his hand. Remove your hand, Pianran said quietly. She slowly raised her head. The color had returned to her face, but her gaze had turned cold. In that instant when he touched her, her memories had returned. Somehow, his hand had unlocked the door to her past. Her name was Pianran. Born in V City in 1990. She had no parents and grew up in the city orphanage. At 14, she left to live on her own. At 23, she met Yunkai and fell in love. 3 years later, they broke up. And then, she did something terrible. She poisoned him. What happened after that, she couldn't remember. That part was missing. Then, she met a strange woman, one who promised her a second chance. And then she ended up here, wherever here was. It felt like she had traveled back in time, to ancient China. But the place didn't matter. Without Yunkai, her world felt aimless. Just like that day she saw him holding another girl's hand, the way her heart twisted with helpless pain, as if something was gnawing away at her from the inside. She had stayed awake for 3 days and nights, staring at a photo of the two of them, until finally, in a moment of madness, she acquired 2 deadly syringes. What happened to him? If she had died, did that mean he was still alive? She blinked slowly. Maybe, this was for the best. At least now, she wouldn't have to watch him leave her again. Chapter 5, Knocked Out Cold. Take your hand off me, Pianran said calmly. She had always disliked being touched, regardless of gender. The only exception was her ex-boyfriend. Yes, ex-boyfriend. They had already broken up before she came to this world. Now, her mood was far from good. She had no desire to deal with anyone. All she wanted was a quiet place to be alone. Yet the man in front of her seemed to turn into a statue in an instant, standing motionless and staring at her. Don't you understand that men and women should keep a proper distance? Pianran lost her patience and brusquely swatted his hand away, freeing him from his daze. My apologies. The man's cheeks reddened slightly, though an inexplicable feeling rippled through his chest. Well, may I ask your name? I don't want to tell you, Pianran replied bluntly, not even bothering with courtesy. Sweat beaded on the man's forehead. What is going on? Did he really come off as so unlikable? He rubbed his face, doubting his earlier clarity. Was he dreaming again? Or just imagining things? When are you leaving? Pianran glanced into the distance, clearly annoyed. You're leaving? Then maybe we could. He was just about to suggest they travel together when she turned to him with a serious expression. If you leave, I don't have to. If you don't leave, then I will. The man was stunned, then burst out laughing. Was she speaking in riddles? Intrigued, he played along with mock solemnity. If you go, I go. If you don't go, I stay. If you want me to leave, I'll purposely stay. So, will you go or won't you? You are insufferable. Pianran was exasperated, glaring at him as if trying to chase him off with her stare. But the man remained unfazed, standing there at ease, not budging an inch. Gurgle, a rather undignified sound interrupted the moment. You're hungry? He asked with a laugh. What's it to you? Pianran covered her stomach and finally gave up the pointless standoff, turning to walk away, deeper into the sea of flowers. Hey, you're going the wrong way. If you want to fill your belly, the city's that way. Chianma City is in the other direction, the man called after her, pointing with amusement. Pianran paused, hesitated for a few seconds, then reluctantly turned back. As she passed him, she made a point to say, don't follow me. But no sooner had she taken a few steps than he trailed along right behind her. Didn't I say not to follow me? She snapped, glaring. There's only one road to the city. Are you saying you can walk it but others can't? He replied with a half-suppressed grin. His audacious smile made Pianran's teeth itch with frustration. Why was he so annoying? She had already made it clear she didn't want to walk with him, yet he shamelessly tagged along. Have you made up your mind? Are we walking together or not? This time, he took the initiative. You walk ahead, Pianran suddenly said. Lien Tian blinked. Was this a compromise? Secretly pleased, he smiled warmly and said, I'm Lien Tian. Nice to meet you. Pianran gazed at him coolly and replied, indifferent, done talking? Then get going. Right. Lien Tian winced inwardly. What kind of strange girl had he run into? Smiling wryly, he shrugged and turned to walk ahead. But he had barely taken 2 steps when he felt a gust of wind rushing toward him. As he turned, he caught sight of a pair of cold, indifferent eyes. You, ambushed, that was all he managed to say before a sharp numbness struck his neck and his vision darkened. So fast. In all his years, he had never suffered a sneak attack like this. Refusing to go down without a fight, he reached out weakly, grasping at her with the last of his strength before everything went black. Ah! A soft cry escaped Pianran as Lien Tian, unwilling to fall alone, collapsed toward her. Off balance and unprepared, she was pinned beneath him like a human cushion. Unbelievable! She had clearly miscalculated. That final lunge had caught her off guard. The move she had used, the infamous knife hand strike taught by a reclusive elder, had never once failed her, until now. Pushing against his chest, she shoved him aside and sat up. Glancing at the unconscious man sprawled amid the flowers, her eyes eyes narrowed in curiosity. Just now, she had caught a fleeting trace of a familiar scent. Was it an illusion? Biting her lip, she leaned down slowly, inching closer and closer to Lien Tian's face. Her heart pounded wildly, but even when her nose nearly touched his cheek, she still couldn't detect that elusive scent. Straightening slightly, she stared at his handsome sleeping face and let out a soft sigh of disappointment. I must still be dreaming. She stood, exhaled deeply, and regained her composure before striding out of the flower field in the direction of Tianmo City. Beyond the field was a long north-south road. She walked for nearly half an hour before a towering city gate appeared in the distance. Gurgle, her stomach rumbled again. It had been protesting for a while now. What's going on? Was it possible that, along with her memories, her body's physical state had also carried over into this world? Before she came here, she had gone 3 days and nights without food or sleep. Now, waking up in this place, she wasn't just moody, she was exhausted and starving. She found a smooth stone by the roadside and sat down, wiping sweat from her brow with her sleeve. Her heart still beat fast. Thinking of the man who called himself Lien Tian, she frowned. It must have been a hallucination. That feeling she sensed, how could he possibly have that same presence? That presence, only one person had ever made her feel it. Lowering her head, she scuffed the dirt with her shoe. Why can't I forget him? Even after the breakup, she still longed for the scent of him. In her whole life, no one had stirred her heart the way he had. She had always warned herself not to rely too heavily on anyone. She never believed anyone could stay with her forever. Before she turned 10, she thought Yunkai would be by her side until death. But he left, didn't he? Even when they met again later, she was no longer the little girl who clung to him. She had her own thoughts, her own life. Though bleak and lonely, she had made it through on her own, hadn't she? But why, after losing him again, did it hurt so much more now? She remembered that day she'd seen him holding another girl's hand, smiling so gently. Her heart had felt like it was pierced by a sharp blade. In a daze, she had seen a younger version of him, getting into Halom's car, fading into the distance. Without a word, she had turned and walked away. 13 years ago, she had endured one goodbye. She refused to hear another. So that was the breakup? She had locked herself at home, shut off all communications, and sat on the floor hugging their photo, unmoving, for 3 days and nights. No, she couldn't keep thinking of him. They no longer belonged to the same world. This time, this goodbye was final. Chapter 6, a chance encounter on the road, so annoying. Pianran sat by the roadside, hugging her knees, her mind a chaotic mess that left her frustrated and restless. Just as she was about to get up, she heard the rapid clatter of approaching hooves. Looking up, she saw 3 riders nearing, each astride a robust chestnut horse, fine steeds, clearly the kind that could cover 1,000 miles without tiring. Leading them was a tall, striking young man dressed in a simple white robe, his refined appearance only accentuated by the understated elegance of his attire. He was undoubtedly handsome, but that had nothing to do with her. She was about to look away when he suddenly tugged on the reins, halting his horse right in front of her. With a gentle smile, he asked, "Miss, why are you sitting here alone? Are you in some kind of trouble?" Pianran gave him a glance but didn't bother standing up. "I'm fine. Just tired and taking a rest," she replied casually, then turned her gaze elsewhere, clearly signaling she wasn't interested in conversation. A flicker of surprise and faint amusement appeared in the man's eyes. "Are you headed into the city?" he asked. Pianran nodded, inwardly wondering why this man was still lingering. "We're heading there too. If you don't mind, I could escort you," he offered with polite sincerity. "No thanks." Pianran scowled inwardly. "Can't he tell I don't want company?" She glanced at him again and shook her head. "That won't be necessary." Before the man could respond, one of the followers behind him bristled. "What kind of attitude is that? My young master offered his help in good faith, and you just brush him off?" More importantly, it wasn't often someone ignored their young master. His identity alone set him apart, not to mention his extraordinary looks. Girls normally fell over themselves just to earn a glance from him. "I have legs, I can walk. Whether we're headed the same way or not doesn't matter. Now, please mind your own business." Pianran's reply was firm, even curt. Her tone sent the 2 men behind the white-robed young master into a quiet fury. Was their young master being rejected? Since when had they ever encountered such treatment? "You really don't know what's good for you. Do you even know who our young master is?" One of them snapped. "What does it matter to me who he is? I'm not interested." "You!" The man fumed, ready to teach her a lesson, but the young master raised a hand to stop him. "Xingwu, stand down. Don't be rude." "But, young master," the man called Xingwu looked thoroughly aggrieved, but the sharp look in his master's eyes silenced him at once, though he still wore a sullen expression. The white-robed young man dismounted and approached Pianran, his smile unfading. "Forgive my servant's rudeness. Please don't take offense. I am Li Hanqing. If you ever run into trouble, you're welcome to seek me out." Pianran stood up. Now that he had come right up to her, it would be rude to remain seated. When he had spoken to her from atop his horse, his elevated position had made his words feel condescending. Charity, that's what it sounded like. And what she hated most right now were pity and charity. Driven by that aversion, her words had been deliberately sharp. "Li Hanqing? Very well. I'll remember that name." She looked him square in the eye, her tone calm and unreadable. A flicker of surprise again passed through Li Hanqing's eyes before vanishing. He reached to his waist and took out a pale green jade token, offering it to her with a gentle smile. "Take this. If you ever need help, show it and someone will come." Pianran stared at the token but didn't reach for it. She didn't believe in accepting favors so easily. Yet when she caught the subtle, uneasy looks on the faces of the 2 men behind Li Hanqing, a contrary urge stirred in her heart. On impulse, she reached out and took the jade. Li Hanqing's smile deepened at her acceptance. Pianran, however, instantly regretted it. She turned the jade over in her hands, debating whether to return it, but now it would be awkward to do so. Accepting this token meant accepting a favor, and she hated being indebted. She was just steeling herself to hand it back when Li Hanqing mounted his horse and cupped his hands in farewell. Since you prefer to travel alone, I'll take my leave. Until we meet again. Without waiting for her reply, he spurred his horse and rode off with his 2 attendants. Pianran opened her mouth to call after him, but her hand, half raised, slowly dropped. Why did he leave so quickly? Running away from something? She glanced down at the jade, then tucked it into her sash. Fine. I'm starving anyway. Maybe I'll pawn it and get myself a couple of buns. Brushing the grass from her clothes, she headed toward the city. After about a quarter of an hour, the towering city gates finally came into view. Looking up, she saw 3 bold characters on the archway, Qianma City. For guards in green uniforms patrolled the entrance, keeping a close yet unbothered watch on the constant stream of people entering and leaving. As she passed, one of them glanced her way, then looked away, deeming her unworthy of further attention. Pianran suddenly had a mischievous thought. What if I told them I'm not from this world? Would they lock me up as a monster? She chuckled to herself. But really, how am I any different? Just because I came from another world, does that make me special? She still got hungry, still felt tired and annoyed, and would likely face problems she couldn't solve. So what if she'd crossed worlds? There was nothing to gloat about. Life is filled with frustrations. If she had the choice, she'd rather die simply than live complicatedly. Living was exhausting. Yet, when the woman in the white dress had asked her if she wanted to be reborn, she had hesitated. That woman had said she could change her fate. But Pianran knew herself, her twisted, stubborn nature. Could she really live a different life? And if, in the end, the outcome was just as miserable, how could she bear it? She rubbed her forehead irritably, trying to clear her mind. But before she could shake off her thoughts, her stomach let out a loud growl. Sigh. First things first, feed yourself. People lived for food, after all. Looking around, she spotted plenty of inns and taverns, but she had no money. She needed to find a pawnshop. She wandered several streets but saw no sign of one. She frowned. Being a stranger in a strange place was clearly a disadvantage. She wanted to ask someone for directions but didn't know how to start. She stood dazed for a long while, until someone accidentally bumped into her, snapping her back to reality. The man apologized at once. Seeing her hesitation, he smiled and asked, "Miss, are you lost?" Pianran nodded. "Do you know where I can find a pawnshop?" The man blinked, then kindly explained the layout of Qianma City. As it turned out, all the pawnshops and banks were located in the eastern district. Pianran thanked him, somewhat surprised. Seems the people here aren't too bad, she thought. At least no one's calling me a country bumpkin. After turning a few corners, she finally spotted a row of pawnshops, an entire street of them. She picked one that looked modest and unassuming and walked in. The shopkeeper greeted her with enthusiasm. "Looking to pawn something, miss?" She nodded and placed the jade token on the counter. The man blinked at it, then carefully picked it up, examining it with a strange expression. "You want to pawn this?" Pianran gave him a glance and nodded again. The shopkeeper turned the token over and over in his hands, clearly torn. At last, he sighed and returned it with both hands, forcing a smile. "I'm sorry, miss, but I dare not accept this." "Dare not?" Pianran frowned. She silently took back the jade and left the shop. If this one won't take it, there are plenty more to try. Yet after visiting 4 or 5 other shops, not one was willing to accept the token. "What is this stupid thing?" she muttered, clutching it in frustration. The jade felt smooth and cool in her hand. She could tell even without expertise that it was high quality. The shopkeepers had clearly recognized its value too. Yet none of them would take it. The last one even advised her to try a bigger shop. It wasn't personal, she reasoned. They're not being difficult on purpose. Who turns down money if they don't have to? The more she thought about it, the stranger it seemed. She looked around. After scanning 2 nearby shops, her eyes landed on a third. A slow smile crept onto her face, and she strode toward it. What drew her attention was the shop's grand and elegant signboard, upon which 4 bold words were carved, all things pawned alike. Interesting. If they dared to put that out front, they must be bold indeed. Let's see if they'd refuse this hot potato. She stepped through the doors of the grandly named auspicious pawnhouse, her expression composed and confident. Chapter 7, The Pawn Jade. Shopkeeper, can you tell me how much this jade is worth? Pianran asked casually as she tossed the token onto the counter. The shopkeeper was a man in his 40s, neatly groomed with a mustache and a kind, composed demeanor. Smiling, he picked up the jade, but his expression changed instantly the moment he laid eyes on it. "Miss, are you trying to pawn this?" Why was that always the first thing people said? Was pawning a jade token really so strange? Why did everyone act so surprised? What exactly was the story behind this piece? Why? Is it unpawnable? Pianran couldn't help asking, her curiosity finally getting the better of her. To her surprise, the man burst into laughter, shaking his head as he chuckled, leaving Pianran utterly baffled. "Hey, are you going to take it or not?" she snapped, nearly losing her temper. If it weren't for her stomach grumbling insistently, she might have turned on her heel and walked out. Ahem, well, the shopkeeper cleared his throat and instead asked, "May I ask why you want to pawn this jade token?" "That's none of your business, is it?" Pianran said, visibly annoyed. "Do you people always need a reason just to take something in pawn? Either take it or don't. Why all the questions?" The man smiled again. "Miss, I'm guessing this isn't the first pawn shop you've tried, is it? I suspect no one else would take it either." Well, if someone had, she wouldn't be here, would she? What was he trying to say, skirting around the point like that? "To be perfectly honest with you," the shopkeeper said, his smile fading into a more serious expression, "even if you scoured all 9 cities and 36 towns, no one would dare accept this jade. So it was something troublesome." Pianran raised an eyebrow. "And what about you? This shop?" "My shop," the man hesitated. "Also won't take it," he admitted, his tone laced with apology. Pianran blinked slowly, then abruptly said, "Shopkeeper, may I borrow your ladder?" "Ah." The man was clearly caught off guard. "What for? If you don't lend it to me, how am I supposed to take down your signboard?" "Take down our sign?" The shopkeeper was dumbstruck. "If you're not going to accept my jade, then how can you call yourself all things pawned alike?" she said, her tone sharp but polished. flushed. Judging by the grandeur of your establishment, your shop likely enjoys a respectable reputation. So how can you engage in such contradiction? To preserve your good name, I think I'd better help you remove that sign. Her words were both courteous and forceful, leaving the shopkeeper caught between laughter and despair. If she really took down the sign, what face would he have left before his boss? Young lady, you certainly have a sharp tongue. I, Jean, must admit I'm impressed. But even if you do tear down my sign, I still dare not take that jade. However, if you're truly in need, I wouldn't mind offering some financial help out of generosity. Ran frowned again. The whole point of pawning the jade was to avoid owing anyone a favor. If she wanted help, she could have just gone straight to that Li Hanqing. He certainly didn't seem to be short on money. Forget it. Since you can't take it, I won't force you. She tucked the jade back into her sash and turned to leave. Wait, miss. The shopkeeper, Jean, called out to her. After a moment of thought, he said, if you truly need money urgently, I might have another solution. Oh. Ran paused and turned around, curiosity piqued. While the jade can't be pawned in the usual sense, we could treat it as a temporary pledge. If you're agreeable, I can write up a receipt for you. Ran considered it. That could work. She nodded. All right. I'll trouble you, then. Shopkeeper Jean beamed, then fetched brush, ink, and paper. After writing in an elegant script, he gently blew the ink dry and handed her the document. Please review this, miss. Then just fill in the pledge amount and your name. Ran took the sheet. Written in upright characters, it read, a young woman from Qingshui City pledges a jade token. Its value shall be noted as proof. The lines after young woman and value had been left blank, obviously for her to fill in. She picked up the brush but suddenly paused. A calligraphy brush? She frowned. Is something wrong, miss? Jean asked, a flicker of concern crossing his face. Could it be she doesn't know how to write? It's nothing, Ran said quickly. A brush it was. Not like ballpoint pens had been invented yet anyway. She accepted her fate and signed her name with the brush. Glancing at the slightly stunned look on Jin's face, she shrugged and handed the receipt back to him. Ran, Jean read aloud, then looked up. How much would you like to borrow? Not too much, she replied after a brief thought. 500 taels, he suggested tentatively. 500? She'd never be able to repay that. She shook her head and offered a much smaller number. 50 taels? Jean broke out in a cold sweat. Is that a problem? No problem at all, he said quickly, wiping his forehead. He had been surprised far too many times today. He filled in the amount on the receipt, added the shop seal, and finally retrieved a silver ingot and even offered her a coin pouch. Missy, please keep it safe. Ran accepted the pouch, tied it to her waist, then handed the jade token to shopkeeper Jean. I'll redeem the jade in a month. Jean received the jade with both hands, handling it as though it were a precious relic. He stood there a moment, watching her leave, then carefully stored the token and receipt, gave a few quiet instructions to his assistants, and hurried out of the shop. As for Ran, she made her way back to the northern part of the city, following her memory. This area was a haven for food lovers, lined with food stalls and eateries, a true street of delicacies. She chose a clean and quiet restaurant and stepped inside. Right this way, miss, said a server with a white towel over his shoulder, rushing to greet her. Glancing around and seeing only 4 or 5 occupied tables, Ran nodded with satisfaction and picked a secluded corner. The server wiped the table and poured her a cup of tea with a courteous smile. Miss, we offer a wide range of dishes. What would you like to eat? Bring me the fastest dish you've got. I don't care if it's the best, just make it quick. Ran was already starving. She had chosen this quiet place precisely because fewer patrons meant less waiting time. If she didn't eat soon, she might become the first person to starve to death in another world. The server blinked, clearly not used to customers like this. What? Is there a problem? She frowned at him. And not at all. Please wait just a moment, he said, quickly regaining composure with a practiced smile. Soon, a steaming bowl of beef noodles was placed in front of her. Ran said nothing and immediately dug in, finishing the bowl in a flash. Another bowl. The server, who had been silently marveling at her speed, froze for a moment before hurrying back to the kitchen. Another steaming bowl soon arrived, and Ran devoured it just as quickly, completely unaware that her eating habits were now drawing sideways glances from nearby tables. Has this girl not eaten for days? She looks like she's been reincarnated as a hungry ghost, the server thought to himself. Most girls could barely finish one bowl of beef noodles. This one was about to polish off her second, and with a figure as slender as hers, it was a wonder where it all went. All right, miss, your 2 bowls. He stood by, waiting for her to finish. Just as he was about to speak and tally up the bill, she looked up and said, bring me one more. The server froze, jaw slack, eyes wide. Chapter 8, Job Hunting. A stifled laugh rang out from behind her. Ran frowned but ignored the one who laughed. She simply turned to the waiter and asked, what now? Are you out of food, or are you afraid I can't pay? She pulled the silver ingot from her pouch and held it in her palm, not slamming it down arrogantly, but letting it glint plainly in the light. And no, that's not what I meant. I'll get it right away. The waiter flushed red with embarrassment and rushed off toward the kitchen. Only then did Ran glance back and discover a girl in a red dress sitting a table away, staring at her with unabashed curiosity, like she had just spotted some rare creature. When she noticed Ran looking, her pretty face lit up with a warm, friendly smile. Sister, can I sit with you? Ran met her eyes but replied without hesitation, her words like a cold splash of water. Sorry, no. The red-dressed girl, who had half risen from her seat, froze. Her smile faltered. Are you angry, sister? I didn't mean anything by it. I just laughed out of curiosity, that's all. I swear, I meant no harm. Why did that sound so familiar? Why did everyone keep saying that to her lately? First it was Lian Tian pestering her for no reason, then Li Hanqing giving her gifts unprovoked, and now this red-dressed girl. When did she suddenly become so popular? She was drowning in debt. Where would she find the time to make friends with these privileged young people? First, I'm not angry. Your mouth's on your face. If you want to laugh, laugh. Second, I'm busy and don't have time to entertain you, so don't waste your time on me. Third, I don't know you, and I don't plan to know you, so whether you meant well or not is irrelevant. With that, she turned her attention to the third bowl of noodles just placed in front of her, and with godlike speed, polished it off. All right, the bill, please. Why yes, miss. That's 3 bowls of beef noodles, 31 each, 91 in total. The waiter replied promptly. Here's 50 taels. Pianran handed him the silver ingot and waited calmly for her change. But of course, someone just had to butt in. She looked up to see the red-dressed girl standing in front of her again, and her brows twitched slightly. Sister, are you in a hurry? Maybe I can help? No need. Pianran's tone was indifferent. Just then, the waiter returned with her change. Miss, here's your change, 49 taels and 9 chien in silver, plus 10 copper coins. Pianran took the silver and tucked it into her pouch but pushed the copper coins back toward him. Brother, I have a few questions. The waiter beamed. Who didn't like a little extra for free? Ask away, miss. Is anyone in town hiring? Hiring? He looked slightly confused. Yes, hiring for servants, maids, houseworkers, that sort of thing. Oh, yes. The One Beast Carriage Company in the west side of the city is looking for help. I heard they're quite strict though. Then there's the Liu family and the One family in the south, both looking for maids to serve their unmarried daughters. Oh, and the city lord's residence is hiring too. I heard they're expecting important guests, and they're short on both maids and guards. You should try there. The city lord's residence? Pianran arched an eyebrow. Yes, that's the dream of everyone in Qingshui City. I bet the line for applications is a mile long by now, the waiter said with pride, as if he worked there himself. That many people? Pianran murmured. Well, in that case, she definitely wasn't going. Crowds were the worst. Thanks, brother. No need, no need. Miss, are you heading to the city lord's place? Pianran didn't answer. She simply turned and left the restaurant, heading south. Sister, are you going to the city lord's estate? She had barely taken a few steps when someone caught up to her. Pianran sighed and turned to find the red-dressed girl standing in front of her again. What do you think? She was clearly not heading toward the north where the estate lay. Why don't you want to go to the city lord's residence? The girl pouted, looking visibly disappointed. I don't want to. Why did this girl care where she went? But sister, it's so fun there. You should really check it out. The city lord is super handsome and really nice too. Was this girl selling apples or something? Pianran shook her head. Little girl, time for you to go home. Sister, I'm not going home, the red-dressed girl huffed. Apparently quite the clingy type, she even started pouting and acting spoiled. Too bad Pianran was immune to that sort of thing. Whatever you like. Just stop following me. I'm not going to the city lord's residence. With that, she quickened her pace and left the stubborn girl stamping her foot in frustration behind her. Ugh, what was with her lately? Was she cursed to attract clingy people? She had things to do, earn 50 taels, redeem the jade, and pay back Li Hanqing. She didn't have time for more drama. She just wanted a quiet place to live, free from complications. The waiter had said the Liu family was hiring maids to accompany their unwed daughters. Serving young noble women with simple minds should be easy enough. As for those high-maintenance places, best to steer clear. Her pace was brisk, and after about half an hour, she arrived at the Liu family's grand estate in the southernmost part of Qingshui City. A sizable crowd had gathered at the gates, mostly poorly dressed girls from humble families. Clearly, they were here for the same reason. At the entrance sat an elderly man with a neatly groomed white beard, likely the steward. He held a brush and was noting down names while a few well-dressed young male servants stood nearby, maintaining order and eyeing the applicants. Pianran joined the line quietly, speaking to no one and listening to everything. I wonder if I'll be chosen, a round-faced girl murmured nervously. The Liu family is one of the top households in the city. If I could become a maid here, that'd be such an honor. Definitely. I heard the Liu family pays really well. Most places only give 1 tael per month, but Liu pays 3, said a girl behind her with a slim face and wide, fluttering eyes. I've heard the same, another timid voice joined in. Master Liu and his wife are said to be very kind. That's why I decided to try. Oh, Yuding, you're here too? The slim-faced girl suddenly beamed, clearly recognizing the speaker. Pianran glanced up and saw her grab the hand of a particularly delicate-looking girl with refined features. Uncle Wu actually let you come? My father's health hasn't been good these past 2 years, Yuding said softly. I had to beg him for ages before he agreed to let me help support the family. Her gentle tone was so pleasant that even Pianran couldn't help stealing another glance. I heard Master Liu has 6 daughters, all beauties, especially the third young lady, smart and stunning, and she visits the city lord's residence often. If we could serve her, maybe we'd get to go there too. Yeah, but I also heard the third young lady's incredibly clever and sharp. Ordinary girls can't even get close to her. Well, girls from families like that are bound to be exceptional. It's no surprise they visit the city lord's estate. But daughters of regular families like us? We could never be that lucky, Yuding sighed wistfully. Exactly. No point dreaming about it. Even if the city lord's residence is hiring, they're only choosing children of upper-middle families. My family's not too bad, but I still only dared to apply to the Liu household. If I went to the city lord's estate, I doubt I'd even be considered. Is the city lord's residence really that amazing? Just as the three were lost in longing and self-pity, a cool voice cut through the warm spring air, carrying an unexpected chill. All three turned in unison to see a plainly dressed girl standing silently at the back of the line. Her face was calm, her gaze detached, completely unlike theirs. Well, of course. Everyone dreams of working there, said the slim-faced girl, eyeing Pianran curiously. You look unfamiliar. You're not from around here, are you? Pianran nodded faintly but said nothing more. So that red-dressed girl hadn't been lying after all. Still, she had no interest in the city lord's residence. Her aloof response dampened the girl's enthusiasm, and they soon turned back, waiting quietly for the line to move. Time passed slowly, and just when Pianran was starting to doze off on her feet, it was finally their turn. Chapter 9, Entering the Liu residence. I am Liu Quan, head steward of the Liu family. The master has tasked me with selecting maidservants for the young ladies, and I will personally oversee the recruitment. The requirements are simple. First, literacy. Second, a proper appearance. And third, a clean background. Now then, one at a time. The man, clearly the steward, gave a brief introduction and laid out the qualifications. The round-faced girl instantly froze. She couldn't read, as it turned out, and was dismissed with a wave of Liu Quan's hand. Next came the slim-faced girl. She stepped forward gracefully, offered a composed curtsy, and said with a smile, "Greetings, Steward Liu. My name is Su Mingxue. I live in the eastern part of the city." She pulled a household registration document from her sleeve and handed it over. Lu Quan glanced at it, then at her, and gave a small nod. "All right, you may stay." Delighted, Su Mingxue was led inside by a servant. Seeing her friend accepted, Wu Yuding was both happy and nervous. She stepped up cautiously, handed over her registration, and mimicked Su Mingxue's curtsy. "Greetings, Steward Liu," she said timidly. Lu Quan's eyes lit up at the sight of her. What a beautiful girl, he thought. Her looks were nearly on par with the young mistresses of the house. Such a pity she's of humble birth. Very well. You may stay, he said with a wave. Next, Pian Ran stepped forward and stated her name softly. Pian Ran? Lu Quan frowned. Are there any families with the surname in Qingshui City? Sounds unfamiliar. Can you read? He asked. Pian Ran nodded. Where is your household registration? I don't have one. No? Lu Quan stared at her in surprise. You're not from Qingshui City? Pian Ran's travel notes, Chapter 7, is being a non-local disqualifying? I don't believe you mentioned that earlier, Steward Liu, she replied calmly. Lu Quan was momentarily at a loss, but quickly recovered. Well, not exactly, but without registration. It's hard to prove your background. Oh, are you suggesting that people from outside Qingshui City all come from shady backgrounds? She asked, feigning confusion. Lu Quan gave her a second look, amazed. This girl looked so mild-mannered. How could her tongue be so sharp? Even an old fox like him had been caught in her net. Missy jests. I didn't mean it like that. Didn't you? I've heard that Master Lu is kind and charitable, known for treating even his servants with decency. I used to doubt such rumors, but now that I've met his steward, I see they must be true. Steward Liu, you clearly have a discerning eye. Was I wrong to say so? No, what you said is quite right, Lu Quan replied, boxed in. What else could he say? Denying it would be slapping his own face. In that case, do I qualify to stay? Pian Ran asked, gently yet firmly, step by step guiding him toward agreement. This, Lu Quan hesitated. Taking in someone with no background or origin wasn't exactly ideal. Pian Ran stepped closer. The Lu family has close ties with the city lord's residence. Surely Master Lu has gained favor through his commitment to fairness and order. Qingshui City is peaceful, surely that's due in part to the city lord's wise rule. As someone new to this city, I've already felt its harmony. To be accepted by the Lu family in my hour of need would reflect well on both your household and the city lord himself. Wouldn't you agree, Steward Liu? How could he not agree? To deny her would be to insult both his master and the city lord. He wouldn't dare. Fine. I'll make an exception this time. You may stay. Lu Quan sighed. What a handful, he thought. And so Pian Ran smoothly entered the Lu household. She was led along with Wu Yuding, Su Mingxue, and a dozen others to a quiet courtyard, clean and tidy, with 7 or 8 adjacent rooms. A woman in her 30s approached with a smile, flanked by 2 maids in green. Girls, come over here. I'm Madame Zhang, the stewardess of this servant quarter. I'll be in charge of settling you in. If you have any issues, come find me. Greetings, Madame Zhang, the girls chorused, curtsying. No need for formalities, she said, waving them off. Since this is your first day, you won't be assigned duties just yet. Rest up after dinner tonight. Tomorrow, the young ladies will select their personal mates themselves. There are 5 rooms here, 2 people to each room. I'll call names to assign the groups. Understood? Yes, ma'am, the girls replied respectfully. Su Mingxue, Lin Xianer, room 1. The slim-faced Su Mingxue stepped forward, glancing regretfully at Wu Yuding. She'd hoped they could room together. Zhang Wenjun, Zhang Minner, room 2. 2 girls of similar height and appearance walked forward hand in hand. Wu Yuding looked on enviously, wringing her hands. Wu Yuding, Pian Ran, room 3. Wu Yuding trembled slightly when she heard her name, but her face lit up with joy when she saw she'd be rooming with Pian Ran. Pian Ran, however, frowned ever so slightly. She had hoped to be paired with Su Mingxue. Wu Yuding was too soft, probably a burden. Sighing inwardly, she walked over to stand beside the beaming girl. Hi, can I call you Sister E? I'm 16, my name is Wu Yuding. And you? Wu Yuding wrung her hands, as if wanting to reach out but not daring to. Here we go again. Pian Ran resisted the urge to sigh. Just call me Pian Ran. Sister? Technically, yes, she was 16, and Pian Ran was 26. But in her past life, she had no siblings, and in this one, she didn't plan on having any either. She was used to being alone and didn't like being depended on. Best to keep a respectful distance. People, after all, were better appreciated from afar. Maybe if she'd never dated anyone back then, she wouldn't be in such a mess now. Oh, Pian Ranjia, Wu Yuding said sweetly. This time, Pian Ran didn't even sigh. Great. A human cling wrap. No shaking her off. Clearly. All right. Everyone head to your rooms and settle in. Dinner will be brought to you shortly, Madame Zhang's crisp voice rang out. Pian Ran turned and walked away without looking back, clearly not waiting for Wu Yuding. Wu Yuding froze, then hurried after her. They entered room 3 together. It was modest but well appointed. 2 beds, 2 wardrobes, a dressing table, and a table with chairs. The furniture was red lacquer wood with floral carvings. On the table sat a porcelain teapot and cups, elegant white china. For a servant room, it was better furnished than most commoners' homes. Wu Yuding looked around in awe, picking things up and exclaiming excitedly. Pian Ranjia, everything's so nice here. Even Sujia's house doesn't have white porcelain cups this fine. Pian Ran glanced at her but said nothing, quietly sitting on the bed, lost in thought. Undeterred, Wu Yuding continued chatting away, touching this and that. Sister, this bronze mirror is so clear. This rouge smells amazing. The bed is so soft, and the embroidery on the quilt is beautiful. I'm going out for a bit. Pian Ran suddenly stood. Wu Yuding blinked in surprise, and her eyes shimmered with tears. Pian Ranjia, am I bothering you? No. Pian Ran replied quickly, terrified she might really cry. I just need the restroom. You rest first. I'll be back soon. She didn't wait for a response and quickly left the room. room, not giving the girl another chance to cling to her. Out in the courtyard, she let out a long breath. It's not that I'm heartless, she told herself, but this girl, she's far too dependent. If she doesn't toughen up, how will she survive in a place like this? Besides, they were strangers. She had no obligation to be someone's emotional crutch. She had only stepped out to familiarize herself with the grounds. She didn't like feeling unprepared in someone else's territory. Chapter 10, Midnight Reconnaissance. Following the winding path through an arched gate, Ren arrived at a vast man-made lake. Though lotus season had yet to arrive, the lake was already blanketed in dense, jade-green leaves that crowded together, rippling gently in the breeze like a sea of emerald. At its center stood an octagonal pavilion, furnished with stone tables and stools. A tasseled cloth lay across the table, beside an exquisitely crafted teapot. A narrow bridge stretched across half the lake, linking the shore to the pavilion, serene and refined. As Ren strolled along the lakeside, her thoughts drifted, her gaze momentarily unfocused. Stop right there. Which courtyard are you from? What are you doing here? A sharp voice cut through the silence. She turned to see a tall young woman in a yellow brocade robe standing not far behind, a tray of shattered porcelain in her hands. I'm newly assigned to the household. I haven't been placed yet, Ren replied evenly, unbothered by the girl's tone. A new maid? Suspicion flickered across the girl's face. Then you should be staying in your quarters. What are you doing wandering around? Apologies. I needed the latrine and lost my way, Ren replied calmly, her expression unchanging. The privy is in the northeast corner of Ling Lake. The yellow-robed girl pointed curtly. And here, throw this away while you're at it. She shoved the tray toward Ren with disdain. Understood. Ren took it without protest and headed in the direction indicated. After walking 5 minutes and passing through another arched gate, she found the latrines, and nearby, the dumping area. She tipped the tray to discard the shards, but just as she did, something small and round rolled out from beneath them. Startled, she crouched down and gently brushed aside the broken porcelain. What she picked up was a thumb-sized, grayish ball, sticky to the touch. She couldn't tell what it was. After a brief pause, she wrapped it in a handkerchief and tucked it into her clothing. Then she discarded the remaining debris and returned to the courtyard. Along the way, she quietly observed her surroundings. The Lu estate was clearly designed with Ling Lake as its central axis, its wings radiating outward. She closed her eyes for a moment and visualized the layout. Strangely enough, a Bagua diagram emerged in her mind. How curious. Could there be some hidden meaning in the Lu family's architectural design? Ranjia, are you okay? Come eat. The food's getting cold. Wu Yuding nudged her gently, concern etched across her young face. I'm fine. Ren picked up her chopsticks and began to eat mechanically, but her thoughts remained elsewhere. Something about this place felt wrong. Had she unknowingly stepped into another den of hidden troubles? Her appetite quickly waned. She set her bowl down and walked to the window. Outside, the sky had darkened, and dusk had fully fallen. Ranjia, Madame Zhang sent over 2 sets of clothes. This one's yours. Wu Yuding handed her a neatly folded robe in pale green. Ren recognized it at once, servant attire. She had seen every maid in the estate dressed in the same color, save for the girl in yellow earlier. Thank you. Ren set it aside on the bed. I heard we're going to meet the young mistresses tomorrow, Wu Yuding said, her voice low and timid as she sat beside Ren. I'm a bit nervous. Nothing to be afraid of, Ren replied, her tone steady. But they're rich young ladies. I don't know what their tempers are like. What if they're hard to serve? Wu Yuding fidgeted, clearly anxious. Ren glanced at her, a flicker of emotion stirring in her chest. She didn't want to admit it, but perhaps she saw something of her younger self in Wu Yuding, small, fragile, uncertain. That familiarity made her reluctant to completely brush the girl off. If they're easy to deal with, we stay. If not, we leave. The city of Qianma is vast. It's not as if only the Lu family hires servants. Wu Yuding's mouth fell open in shock. She was clearly startled by Ran's audacity. Since ancient times, servants were expected to be loyal above all. Ran's nonchalant attitude about changing masters was unthinkable. But you're not from Qianma City. You don't understand. Lu family holds great power here. Even the city lord's manor has close ties with them. Oh, Ran's brows lifted slightly. There are plenty of wealthy families in Qingshui too. Why is it that only the Lu family enjoys such a close relationship with the city lord? Wu Yuding shook her head, clearly clueless. Ren didn't press further. This girl was far too innocent to know anything of use. Get some rest, Ren said softly. Tomorrow will be a long day. Good night, Ranjia. Wu Yuding nodded obediently, drawing the curtain around her bed and lying down. Ren lay back as well, still fully dressed, her eyes closed in faint sleep. She didn't know how much time had passed, but when Wu Yuding's breathing turned steady and deep, Ren quietly opened her eyes. Moonlight poured through the window, casting silver patterns on the floor. Silently, Ren rose, cracked the door open, and slipped out into the quiet night. The wind rustled the leaves overhead as she made her way to the eaves. With a swift motion, she gathered her skirt and leapt lightly onto the railing, then sprang up and caught the edge of the roof. With a graceful flip, she landed atop it, soundless and poised. From this height, the entire Lu residence unfolded before her like a map. Just as I thought, she murmured, scanning the symmetrical layout. After pondering a moment, she looked toward the southeast. It should be that direction. Still uncertain, she began moving across the rooftops, swift and silent. Soon, she reached a secluded courtyard. The red lacquered doors were locked tight with a large bronze padlock. Using the connecting rooftops for leverage, she jumped, flipped, and landed lightly on the far side of the wall. From the shadows, she slipped silently through the courtyard, reaching the main hall in moments. She gently pushed open the door and entered. The moment she turned around to close it, she almost cried out in shock. Ancestral hall? She stood frozen. Before her were rows upon rows of spirit tablets. How could this be? According to her deductions, this should have been the most crucial location in the Lu estate. If the family held any secrets, it would be here. But instead, it was a shrine. She scanned the space. The air was clean, the altar dustless. Offerings of fruit and pastries sat neatly on the table. The incense holders on both sides still burned faintly. Clearly, this place was tended to daily, which made it all the stranger. If something valuable or secret were hidden here, wouldn't they avoid frequent visits? Had she been wrong in her assumption? Perplexed, Ren was just about to leave when a sudden chill prickled the back of her neck. Her instinct screamed. She pivoted just in time. A palm strike grazed her cheek. The force wasn't overwhelming, but it sent a shiver down her spine. Someone else was here. How had she not noticed? A shadow dashed past her with lightning speed, bursting through a window and vanishing outside. Ren didn't hesitate. She followed. As she emerged into the courtyard, the figure had already leapt onto the rooftop and looked down at her. She took a breath and leapt up as well, landing gracefully. The figure seemed briefly startled, but then shot off into the night. Within seconds, he was gone. Ren stared in the direction the shadow had fled. She didn't give chase. She knew full well she couldn't catch him. Just as she turned to return to her quarters, she noticed a glow flaring in the southwest, torchlight, accompanied by faint commotion. Frowning, she darted through the rooftops, swiftly reaching the courtyard. She slipped quietly inside. Wu Yuding was still fast asleep. Relieved, she lay down and closed her eyes. But in her mind, the figure in black lingered. Strange, there was something familiar about him. What was he doing in the ancestral hall? Could he, too, know something about the Lu family's secret? Outside, firelight flickered, and distant voices murmured, but the night soon returned to silence. Ren finally drifted into sleep. Tomorrow, perhaps, would not be so peaceful.